السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. Dear brothers and sisters, inshallah, today I'll discuss the nature and scope of wealth management. So that will cover what is the scope, the aspects of wealth management, what are the different types of planning related to our wealth, and what is the process for wealth management, especially uh, between the wealth planner and the client, and some other important factors related to wealth management and wealth planning goals. So generally, these are the scopes of wealth management. So when we talk about wealth management, it will cover first the investment planning, and then tax planning, state planning, retirement planning, education planning, and insurance planning. So these are the uh, most important planning that is included under the wealth management. So let's look at the investment planning. So this is the most important part of this wealth management. So this investment planning is designed to help individuals with investment strategies with the objectives of generating positive return on investment. So uh, these are the steps necessary when someone is making his investment planning. So the first, the investment planner, the wealth planner should analyze the client's current portfolio and asset allocation to determine if they are appropriate for the financial objectives and lifestyles of the client and his family. So at the first step, the client will analyze the lifestyle and the liquidity needs and the return, whether the client wants a higher return or and what are the goals of the clients in terms of the savings or the retirement planning. So based on that, the planner will analyze his asset, and then he will come with a plan. So here, the very important thing is to assess the risk appetite, where some are willing to take higher risks, where some may take willing to are not willing to take higher risk, and they are happy with the lower return. As we know that higher risk will come with the higher return, and low risk will come with the lower return. So it depends on the willingness, and usually those who are young clients, they prefer to have a higher return with the higher risk because they have much time to recover if there is a loss, comparing with the clients in old age, where they may prefer to have lower risk with a lower return because they have less time to recover if there is a loss. And in this stage, you need to develop an investment strategy by choosing a wide array of investments. So here comes the asset allocation. So based on the goal, the investment planner needs to develop what types of asset classes based on as we know, there are assets which are risky, which with higher returns, some are lower, and in terms of also the liquidity concern. So based on the appetite, based on the goal, and also the assets of the client, needs to develop a strategy, whether of strategy of investment, considering the different types of asset classes, where I should go for risky assets or lower risky assets, or should go for liquid assets or illiquid assets. And then after that, I provide continuous counseling to help client invest and save his time and energy. So the investment planner should also not only stop here after just giving the suggestion, but also need to give continuous counseling, especially if the client lack knowledge on investment. Okay, sometimes they get panic when there is a market crash or there is a pandemic. So even some of the investment planners, when there is any issue in the market, so they will immediately contact their clients and explain what was the reason and what they should. Sometimes they just need clients, they need an assurance from their investment planners if they are not knowledgeable on about the market situation. So if a good investment planner also will monitor, and also they will give counseling to their clients, will explain to them the market situation and what may have in the future, so that it can save the time of the clients and also their energy. So that some of the clients, they tend to so afraid that they always want to change their strategy, they want to take out the money from this asset to another asset class. So this thing happen when the clients do not get counseling from the investment planner. And so after the investment planning the second important thing is the tax planning. So it is so what is tax planning? As we know, we have learned in the previous chapter that in the context of Malaysia, the individuals, the employees, they are required to plan their tax by themselves. It's a self-assessment. So that's actually encourages for all of us to plan our tax. And then second, this tax planning is important. It's a plan to pay less tax by structuring the right mix of investments, because there are some if we choose some countries, for example, so those countries maybe they are not they are giving some kind of incentives in terms of investment. For example, they are not charging any tax on the foreign investors. Like in Malaysia, there is currently no tax on the dividends, for example, or if there is a less tax for certain sectors of business. So we need to plan. As we know, all the big investors like Warren Buffett and others, some of them they didn't even pay taxes in some financial year, because they it's not they uh, evaded the tax, but they legally they planned so that they didn't have to pay tax. For example, they choose to pay charity instead of paying tax, or they didn't liquidate their shares, so they didn't have to pay tax. So tax planning is to plan our tax following the laws and regulation of the country. So here we need to be careful on this factor, is between tax avoidance and tax evasion. Okay? So tax avoidance is legal. This is a planning based on to study the laws and the regulation of the jurisdiction, so that we can pay less tax, or which is we can pay tax which is favorable for us. But tax evasion is something which is illegal, which is a kind of a corruption where people they hide their actual financial situation, so that they pay less tax, like they hide their profits, or they show they show higher costs, so they do not show the real profit. So these are the instances of tax evasion which is illegal, and there is punishment in most of the jurisdiction for this. So tax avoidance is to pay less tax based on what the law allows, while the tax evasion is to manipulate the tax calculation in order to pay less tax. So this manipulation can be in different ways. Can be is a misrepresentation of the financial activities, or the real profit, or increasing the cost and others. So, especially the clients, those who are high net worth individuals, they need to plan their tax. So we can see sometimes the government gives incentives to certain sectors like manufacturing sectors. In manufacturing sectors, for example, the government does not charge tax for the first 5 years or 10 years. So this is an opportunity that the client may think to invest so that they can pay less tax. After the tax planning is the most important part of wealth management is the retirement planning. So, of course, from Islamic perspective, the retirement planning main the scholars have some argument on that. While a group of scholars they say that there is no concept of retirement in Islam. You just retire only once, which is through death. Okay, and they they say that according to Sharia, someone should work as long as he has the energy and capacity to go for retirement at a certain age and to have a relaxed life is not the Islamic concept. However, the Islamic scholars do agree that we may need to save for the future, where we may not be able to work, or we may not have the energy to work, or in if some certain circumstances that or in calamities that arise. They do also agree on the saving for the future. So, however, so the retirement planning is to ensure that we have enough money to spend when we retire. Usually, the retirement age is 60 to 55 to 60. Um, in that, so retirement planning is in reality now it is actually becoming very important because the governments are especially in the context of Malaysia is trying to reduce the government's burden on paying the pension on or reducing the number of pensioners. They are in the future, or maybe most of the employees, even the government employees, they have to uh, plan for their retirement. So in that case, there are some of the factors that need to consider is the inflation rate and the lifestyle expected after the retirement. Usually, in retirement planning, the first they will calculate what will be the cost after based on the lifestyle. Usually, after retirement, people already, let's say, own house. They don't have to pay maybe for house or car, and they don't have to. Maybe they don't need to pay for transportation to go to office. However, they may have to think of medication, for example, or they may need to think about traveling. Okay, so there is a different lifestyle, so they need to calculate what will be how much they need for a year after retirement, and sometimes they like make a expected years of living. Let's say after retirement, you will someone will live for let's say 20 or 30 years. So every years he needs how much money. So let's say he will survive. He plan to let's say survive for 30 years, and every year, so he needs based on the monthly. Let's say every month he needs 5,000. So every year he needs 60,000. So now he will plan. So in after retirement, he needs 60,000 ringgit Malaysia per year. So in order to have 60,000 a year, let's say he should save how much is it 500,000 or 1 million ringgit Malaysia so that he can have a return So if he saves, let's say, 1 million, and every year he has a 6% return from his investment, so it can actually fulfill his needs, which is 60,000. So he does not have to touch his capital. However, if the inflation arises, we need to consider the inflation. Means that the 5,000 right now may not be similar at that time. So that's we need to keep into account. So it's the amount to save and to invest in the diversified portfolio, so that the person has enough to survive after retirement. After retirement is estate planning, or we can say in Islam we have al faraid, or inheritance distribution. And from Islamic perspective, the inheritance distribution is mostly fixed. So there is it is the the, person has or the client has a very less role compared with the conventional perspective, where in the where the non-Muslims usually they need to plan their estate, because they have to make a will, and they can make a will of who will get of what based on their asset. But in Sharia, a person can make will, or what is called wasiyah, but that should not be more than one third. So that is the difference. And there is a fixed portion for certain family members, like for the wife, for the children, for the wife, for father. That is the in Faraid law. However, one important factor here is to set the attorney, or who will be the person in charge to distribute the asset. In some jurisdictions, like in Malaysia, the government has a related body or agencies to do that. So estate planning in terms of faraid, it is fixed. But however, the client also has an option to make a wasiyah, bequest, and also the client also can have wakaf or family wakaf, where he can actually separate his wealth from his own wealth, and he can establish a family wakaf, where he can make so he can make that wealth for his children. And also in that case, he needs to set someone as a beneficiary, maybe his children or his grandchildren or his wives, and then there should be someone as an executor, or we call the mutawalli. So here in the conventional perspective, state planning is really the collection of the preparation tasks that serve to manage an individual's asset based in the event of their incapacitation, means when they are disabled or deaf, and including the bequest of assets to heirs and the settlement of state taxes. So state taxes also a significant factor in jurisdictions where the person who receives inheritance, he needs to pay tax, or sometimes who makes the will, he needs to pay tax. And there are a lot to do from the legal perspectives. They need to hire a lawyer. Most state plans are set up with the help of an attorney experienced in state law. So they need to write the will. So in that case, mostly they need to hire a lawyer to write down. And there are a lot of legal terms that we need to familiar, like the attorney, the trustee, and some others. Another important factor with the state planning is the who will be the trustee, in case if who will be the trustee to distribute the wealth, and in case there is no one, so in the case, there is no one in order to distribute the wealth or the inheritance. There will be whether there will be a government invention or there is any related body. Like in the case of Malaysia, there is Amanah Raya, which is the respected body to be the trustee in that case. So in estate planning, there are also some tests that include creating. These are the creating a will, then limiting the state taxes by setting up a trust account in the name of the beneficiary. So the trust account is something similar to family wakaf, where the money, the asset which is put into the trust account will be separated from the ownership of the person, the client, and it will be so that the creditors cannot touch that money. So that is the trust account, and of course there will be some beneficiaries, and establishing a guardian for living dependents. So who will be the mutawalli, for example? So in Islamic perspective, we can say mutawalli, or a person who will be in charge to take care of the children, for example. So naming an executor of the state to oversee the terms of the will. So who is the person who will be the executor who will execute the what is mentioned in the will. It can be a lawyer or somebody he appoints. So that also can is a similar concept of maybe the mutawalli. And then creating and updating beneficiaries on plans such as life insurance. So as we know that this estate planning may change in time, because sometimes there is a marriage, children, and also the death of a children or born of a new children. So yeah, there may have some changes in that planning. So they need to review and may change time to time. And state planning also includes setting up the funeral arrangement, where in some cases, as we know, the funeral costs are very high, especially if I'm not mistaken, for some uh, in some cultures or in some different religions, their funeral arrangements are so expensive. So people also plan or set aside some money for that. But as we know from Islam, we have a fixed way or procedure that after a person's death, his money will be used to do the funeral, and then it will be paid for his debt, and then it will be distribute, and then it will be used to fulfill his wasiya or will, and then after that it will be used to distribute the inheritance. So this is that I just mentioned that we need to be careful of these few important factors in estate planning that we need to review the estate planning because if there is a change in the client's financial goals, if a marriage, okay, birth of a child or grandchild or other beneficiaries, and there is a significant change of the net worth, it means sold the property or buy a new property or business, and then death of a spouse or beneficiary, and even the changes in tax laws. If suddenly there is a tax law on inheritance, so they may need to change. So this is all about the state planning from the conventional perspective, or we can say the faraid and also wakaf and hibah. Now is the education planning. So education plan is becoming more necessary as cost of education increases, especially the tertiary education or the degree courses in universities are rising. It is very important for parents now to plan for the education of their children. So there are, and also there is a benefit in tax and state planning by property planning for education. So if we pay for education, so there are some jurisdiction they give tax exemption if we pay tuition fee. So it's not only about children's education planning; it can be our own education planning as well. If we pay tuition fees, so we may get tax exemption. And this education planning is a long term planning, especially when the children born from that time, the parents may need to plan so that it is better, so that they can have higher return and better saving for their children, especially the big amount of money is needed when the children they go to university, or while still in most of the countries the primary education and secondary education is free, but it also may need money if they choose to go to private schools. Then it needs a lot of money. And secondly, for the university degrees. Well, even some countries, the governments are providing education loans, but then it will be very good for the parents to that if they have a saving so that they can avoid uh, taking loan for their children, or it is not good from students' perspective that they are studying before they get a job. They already have loan and they have debts, so which might be stress for them as well. So after that, one another important thing is insurance planning, that your ability to continue to meet your long-term goals despite an unexpected loss. So we know that any calamities, accidents may happen in our life. So we need to protect ourselves in these types of cases. And well, according to Sharia, also it is in line if we protect ourselves or prepare to prepare for the future, and we can learn. We have learned from the story of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, where how he prepared for the worst days. So it is fine if we have um, insurance planning. However, the concept of insurance or the conventional insurance is not Sharia compliant because of the element of riba and garage. It's because it is they use the buying and selling policies which are not in line with the Sharia. But in Sharia or Islamic finance, we have the takaful, which is based on the concept of tabarru or donation, and mutual indemnity means where group, the clients who join that takaful company, they mutually help each other. They donate so that they will help each other from that fund if there is any calamity or in the future. So some risk exposure that you may face include like premature death, disability, illness, property loss, liability, or even unemployment may happen. So there are different products or different takaful to cover these losses, like employment coverage, illness, okay, which can be covered under medical takaful, death, disability can be covered under family takaful. So, so to cover all this, we need to plan our insurance, or we should have takaful, which is in line with the Sharia. So when we all know all these types of planning, so now I'm going to talking about the process of wealth planning. So what will be the process? So this is the process of wealth planning. So When a wealth planner, okay, will meet the client, the first thing they will establish and define the relationship. So at that, and then he will the wealth planner will gather the data. So here in this stage, they will discuss, negotiate what are the goals of the client, what are the net worth, what are the assets, liabilities, and what are the life events that may happen to him. At the same time, also the wealth planner, or how much, what are the services that he will provide, and how much fees he will take, that his what will be his job scope. So that will be discussed in the first and second step. And then also we need to know the willingness of taking risks, and as well as other goals of the client. So after getting all this information at the second, the wealth planner will analyze and evaluate. He will analyze the assets, the liabilities, and then he will evaluate it, and and also he will evaluate it against the goals and the life events that's related to him. And after that, he will come out with a plan, development plan, and present the plan of, okay, he will develop a wealth allocation planning, okay, the investment planning, and for insurance planning and others. So we'll develop the plan and he will present, and then they will have a negotiation. They will have a discussion with the client. If the client approves it, then they go to the implementation planning. So they will implement, start to do the investment, for example, start to do the will writing, for example, for estate planning, and also execute the takaful planning. But after that, they also need to do the monitor, for based on the initial agreement. They will monitor, and time to time, maybe every year, and they will check whether it is in line with their client's objective. If the client's objective was to have 6% return a year, so whether it is okay or not, and what can be done. So it is also the job of the wealth planner. So this is the usually the process of wealth planning. So here is an example that I took from openlearningworld.com. So it's of a personal net worth. So here at my left is the asset side, where you can see the person's current assets in terms of cash here, and then in terms of the investment stocks, yeah, investment in mutual fund in dollar like 2,500, and retirement plans like savings, okay, here, okay, and then the house, now no housing, so it's zero, and then the automobiles here, personal property, so altogether add up is 14,450 US dollar. And at the right side are the liabilities. So his current liabilities, like some unpaid balances, like Visa and Mastercard balances, and then long-term liabilities. He doesn't have any house financing, it's zero, but he has auto 500, college loan 3,000. So you add up, its total liability is 4,200. So if we deduct this total liability from this total asset, so we get the net worth, which is 10,000. So after we know this with his net worth, so we can plan the investment based on his like goal, and also we can also set aside some for other planning like takaful, and also kids education and others. So now there are some important factors that the wealth planner needs to consider when they are planning or analyzing the client's wealth. Okay, the first is the liquidity issue is very important. So liquidity is necessary for immediate consumption. So asset should be kept in a different grades of liquidity, so that it is easy to liquidate when necessary. So we need to, as wealth planner, we need to understand if whether the client has liquidity needs, or he may need to liquidate, because if we put in uh, illiquid assets, we may lose our profit if we liquidate, or it may take time. So we need to consider the liquidity issue for a person, and it is better to put some asset in liquid and some in illiquid to make a balance. Uh, so, uh, so if we know the person's need, so we need to put that, considering the need, we need to put that amount in the liquid assets. So these are the examples from usually these are conventional assets. So usually the currency, the notes are the most liquid, and then it goes to the money markets, and then after the more illiquid, and then the stocks. After the stocks, the real estate is, and capital investment business. They are the most illiquid assets. So we should make a balance, and we need to consider how much the person may need to withdraw to fulfill their liquidity needs, so that we need to put the similar amount in the near liquid assets. And the second important factor is the risk and return trade-off. As we know, higher risk will yield higher return, and lower risk will have lower return. So the wealth planner needs to understand the trade-off concept and the client's willingness to take risks. As I have discussed before, that some clients, they have willingness to take risks, and they have understanding of this risk and return concept. However, some they are afraid to take risks. Rather, they want to preserve their wealth, and they are fine with a very low level, very low return. So if we go for risk-free investment, so we need to consider that there will be very low return, because there is a fee for the guarantee. And another important factor also is the consistency of return. While sometimes we may receive higher return, but if after getting higher return, after that, if there is a loss, which is not good. Rather, if there is a consistency of even low return, that is better than we get a higher return and then there is a loss, the volatility of the return. We need to, so here the best one is the return which is consistent. And at the same time, also we need to consider the service by the wealth planner. It's not only about risk and return. Some clients also, they think that the service, whether the wealth planner is educating the client in terms of in some situation when there is a loss, or there is any changes in the market. So the good wealth planner, they will monitor, and then they will time to time will counsel the clients on different market situations, and to educate them about the risk and return policy. So that's why the service also important to the clients. And these are the Islamic assets, and based on the risk and return. So we can see that this one, the Qardul Hassan, is the less risky with the less return. And you can see the Sukuk can be at the middle. It's a little higher, slightly higher risk with a higher return. And the most risky is the Musharaka private equity and also Sharia compliant equities. So they have a higher risk, at the same time they will have higher return. But this needs to be so careful in terms of choosing the right stocks. So that's, and better is to have a balance among these two, and also look at the willingness and the situation of the client. So that's all on this chapter. So with that, I thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.